You're listening to the Codependent Millennial Podcast with Sophie Shiloh, episode 28, Empowerment Around the Election. Hello, my loves. I hope you're all doing well. There is a lot of emotional childhood that happens with elections, and as we've talked about before here on the podcast, emotional childhood is the function of disempowerment. Emotional childhood is the way in which we take our own power out of our own hands. There is a lot of putting way too much of our own personal power in the hands of politicians or in election results, and that's really important to discuss because you don't have to do that anymore if you don't want to. I did it for a long time, my whole life. I still slip into it sometimes. More often than I would like, more often than feels good, and that's what we're going to discuss today. It's hard for me to say this when the reality is that so many of us have lives that actually have been directly negatively affected by Trump's presidency and will be directly negatively affected if he is reelected. And that's not what I'm talking about here. Women, people who don't conform to the gender binary, but who still have uteruses and vaginas, BIPOC, the LGBT community, immigrants and refugees and asylees, Native Americans. These are all just a few populations that unfortunately have had our rights, I'll say our because I'm in that group of people, have had their rights denied, curtailed, and taken away by the current administration. However, I do want to discuss how it never serves us to let someone else have more control over our own personal power, over our emotions, over our thoughts, over our decisions, over what we decide we get to have in our lives, over what we decide our lives get to look like. This never, ever, ever serves us. No matter how real it might seem to us, no matter how much evidence we can collect, it just doesn't serve us to hand away our personal power to anyone, ever. The most important thing, the most moist thing that you know, okay, I'm done now. The most important thing that you know right now that I can tell you is that the outcome of this election is not the determining factor in what your life gets to look like, period. It does not get to have that much power over you. If you voted, wonderful. If you voted against racism, against fascism and sexism and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and homophobia and transphobia, wonderful. But it's important to know that the way you engage with the world on a daily basis is what matters most. I'm talking about the way that you engage in social justice work, regardless of who's in office, and the way that you engage with the circumstances of your own personal life. Your personal power is just that. It's personal. It is yours. It doesn't lie anywhere outside of you ever, no matter what. In what ways are you deciding that the outcome of this or any other election will take away your personal power? In what ways are you allowing people who don't have your best interests in mind affect your decisions, your emotional well-being, your peace, your priorities, what you can and can't have in life? That might be the most important question you can answer. What are you afraid this election will take from you or render impossible for you? And how can you decide otherwise? What windows might be open to you when all you're looking for are doors? As Kayaja Brooks said about the cops in her city, but I'm going to use this quote to refer to any white man in power or really any person in power, period. She said, "They can't and won't be both my savior and my oppressor." That's such a profound statement. In what way are you looking for a savior, for you or for your world, whatever that might look like? In what way are you looking to a politician to be the hero in your life? And beyond that, in what ways are you looking for a savior in your life in general? Are there things you want in your life that you don't currently have that you're waiting for someone else to give you or do for you? This is where this discussion around empowerment around the election bleeds into your entire life. If you are expecting a politician to be the savior of your life or to deliver to you an America that you want to live in, I guarantee you there are other areas in your life where you are putting your well-being, your dreams and goals, your happiness in other people's hands, and that's not doing you any good. While your life might not change very much depending on who is in the White House, other people's lives do. I think it really is true that a society can only be measured by the way in which it treats its most vulnerable. That's a Mahatma Gandhi quote. It's very ironic because he was actually super racist and anti-Black. But the quote that he said was, "The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members." And that is so true. It's important to note that a government that was founded by slave owners and rapists and white supremacists and people who actually committed genocide against Native Americans never had those populations' best interests in mind to begin with. So regardless of how progressive our leaders are in this country, it's important to hold them to a high standard of prioritizing the well-being of all constituents and residents, not just those who are white, wealthy, influential, but those who are also incarcerated, who are poor, who are underprivileged, who are unhoused or homeless, who are abused, who don't have citizenship, etc. And that is work that must be done all the time. It's not like once a progressive is elected that suddenly racism doesn't exist anymore, that suddenly there are no more unhoused people in our communities and our cities, that suddenly people don't get racially profiled and wrongly accused of and charged for crimes they didn't commit, that suddenly school shootings stop, that suddenly everyone has equal access to quality education and healthcare and food, etc. I mean, we have a rapist, a sexual assailant, and other dangerous people on the Supreme Court. And our current president thinks that actual literal Nazis and white supremacists who commit actual domestic terrorism, it's terrorism, are, quote, very fine people. Like, that's for real. That's real, you guys. There are a lot of factors at play here. And it would be cool if politicians took care of stuff like that with policy, but they often don't. And in fact, they very often protect the rights of, for example, rapists and racists above those of women and BIPOC. So how can we all be a part of making sure that each election doesn't have to feel like a complete and total panic attack? I love that question. That work happens between election cycles. That work happens person to person. That work is the thing that matters most. And my loves, you know me. I am all about thought work. I think that it is the most important investment we can make to invest in our minds, invest energy and resources and time into really consciously and intentionally cultivating minds that serve us. Like we talked about on this episode, consciously not deciding to hand over your personal power to other people. I think that's really important. And to some extent, to a certain extent, thought work and intentionally choosing the thoughts you think is really important. It serves you. However, I think that there are some things that aren't neutral on this earth. I think that there are some things that we don't try to thought work our way to feel positive about. Things like injustice, things like rape, things like domestic terror, just to name a few. I don't think that we are being called in those areas to find a way to feel peaceful about those things. At least that's not where I'm at right now in my, in my spiritual, intellectual journey. That's not where I'm at. I think that the bigger work for me right now and the work that I'm more interested in doing is not to feel accepting or peaceful about things that are inherently void of peace. I think that the work is to really understand the ways in which we are being called to show up in the world to make it less, like I said before, to make it so that each election doesn't have to feel like a panic attack. To how can we each individually play our small part in creating a world where it's not a political issue whether or not a woman gets to decide what to do with her own body. How can we contribute to a world where it's no longer a political issue when a Black person is profiled, accused of a crime, wrongly charged? How can we contribute to a world where it's no longer a political issue? Oh God, when a woman wants to have a certain job or be paid a certain amount of money. how can we contribute to a world where it's no longer a political issue whether or not the environment should be protected? Like, these are all things that don't really have, that I think don't have a place in, political discourse. Why are these political issues? Why is it controversial for me to say that Black Lives Matter? Why is that? How is that up for debate? Anyways, I love you all so much. These questions can be overwhelming because we are literally talking about the state of our country. We're literally talking about people's actual lives. But these questions keep me moving forward in a way that feels purposeful and good to me. And I hope that you sit with them and explore what they mean for you too. And of course, as usual, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. My email is sophie@codependentmillennial.com. And I hope you all have a beautiful night. I love you. Bye. Thanks so much for listening. If you'd like more information about me and how to work with me, or if you'd like tips on how to move beyond codependency and build a life you truly love, you can find me over on Instagram @codependentmillennial. I'll see you there. Have a beautiful night.